The city of Eldoria gleamed like a jewel under the afternoon sun. Towers of glass and gold rose high into the sky, and marble streets echoed with the sounds of wealth and power. In this city, everyone knew the name Caius Veyron, the man who owned more than any king could imagine. He was sharp, cunning, and untouchable, a man who commanded respect and fear with a single glance. Caius had always known power. Born into wealth and trained to win, he carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. No one dared oppose him, and many whispered in hushed tones about the coldness in his eyes. His empire stretched across Eldoria, and his reputation as a man who never forgave a mistake or an insult was legendary. Yet today, Caius was about to meet someone who would challenge him in a way he had never imagined. The grand banquet hall was filled with Eldoria's elite. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables of glittering crystal and polished silver. Musicians played soft tunes, and the air smelled faintly of roses and cinnamon. Caius entered tall and commanding, dressed in a tailored black suit that seemed to swallow the light around him. Heads turned as he passed. A murmur of admiration and fear followed him. His presence alone made the crowd straighten in their seats. And then there was Alara, standing quietly behind the bar near the far end of the hall. She was a young woman, simple in her dress, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that shone with intelligence and curiosity. She had been working at the banquet for months, serving the city's powerful without drawing attention to herself. Yet today, something in her had changed. She moved with confidence, carrying trays of drinks with steady hands and a quiet smile. The banquet had been going smoothly until Caius, in his usual style, decided to make an example of one of the rival merchants. A simple insult, a careless word, and he turned it into a spectacle, his voice echoing across the hall. Guests whispered behind their fans and napkins, afraid to meet his gaze. Alara had been watching quietly, her curiosity piqued by the show. She noticed the subtle tension in the room, the way people flinched at his tone, and the slight crease in the man's jaw when someone disagreed. For a moment, she wondered why anyone allowed him to control everything with fear alone. And then, with a courage she did not know she possessed, Alara spoke. "You know," she said, her voice soft but clear enough for those nearby to hear. "Sometimes people respect power, but they fear arrogance." A hush fell over the room. Caius turned slowly, his sharp eyes locking onto hers. For a heartbeat, the arrogant billionaire seemed taken aback. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, much less in public. The room held its breath, waiting for him to respond. Caius's lips curved into a small, calculating smile. "And who are you to judge me, little waitress?" he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. Alara smiled, undeterred. "Someone who sees the truth," she said simply. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous and cautious, unsure if she was brave or foolish. Caius's face remained unreadable, but his mind raced. There was something different about her, something that made his usual sense of control falter. For the first time, Caius felt the sting of humiliation, not from an enemy, not from a rival, but from a simple, unassuming woman. He had faced kings, merchants, and even thieves with unshakable confidence. Yet here she was, standing before him unafraid, challenging him in a way that no one else had dared. The banquet continued, but the air had changed. Whispers grew louder, and eyes followed Alara as she moved gracefully among the tables. She carried herself with a quiet authority that seemed to grow with every glance from Caius. After the banquet, when the crowd had dispersed, Caius returned to his towering office, overlooking the glittering city below. The room was silent except for the hum of the city lights far beneath him. He paced slowly, thinking about the woman who had dared to humiliate him in front of everyone. No one ever challenged Caius Veyron. No one had ever seen past the armor of wealth and fear he wore like a second skin. Yet Alara had, and in doing so she had awakened something within him, a mixture of intrigue, admiration, and a flicker of fear he had not felt in years. Meanwhile, Alara returned to the modest apartment she shared with her younger sister. The streets were quiet now, and the golden glow of the city's lights painted long shadows across the cobblestones. She thought about the banquet, about the man with cold eyes and a sharp smile. There was a darkness in him, she could see it, a loneliness wrapped in power and pride. And though she had no intention of getting involved in the dangerous world he controlled, A strange curiosity lingered in her heart. The next day, the city buzzed with news of the banquet. Courtiers and merchants whispered about the incident, some calling it scandalous, others admiring her courage. Caius's name was everywhere, but alongside it was a new one, Ilara, the girl who dared. Caius, however, did not rest. He studied her from afar, learning her patterns, her habits, her small ways of navigating a world that could be cruel and harsh. He found himself thinking about her when he should have been making deals or attending meetings. Her words echoed in his mind, refusing to be silenced. Ilara, too, found herself reflecting on the encounter. She knew the man was dangerous in more ways than one. There was power in him, yes, but also a cage of his own making. She wondered what had made him so cold, so unyielding, and why no one had ever dared to look at him the way she had. Days passed, and the city continued its rhythm, but something had shifted. Caius Veyron, the man everyone feared, found himself uncharacteristically unsettled. He could no longer ignore the presence of Ilara in his thoughts. He began leaving subtle notes, discreet messages, invitations to meet under the guise of business or chance encounters. Each note carried a mix of challenge and fascination, a silent acknowledgement that she had left her mark on him. Ilara received the notes with cautious curiosity. She was wary of power, of wealth, and certainly of arrogance. But there was a strange pull she could not explain, a mixture of intrigue and the sense that fate, in some mysterious way, had drawn them together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of orange and purple, Ilara found herself walking through the quiet streets, clutching a letter that bore the seal of Caius Veyron. She hesitated, then opened it. The message was simple: meet me where the city sleeps and the truth can no longer hide in shadows. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. She knew she was stepping into a world far larger than her own, a world of secrets, power, and things beyond understanding. Yet she also knew, deep in her heart, that she could not turn away. Caius, in his penthouse high above the city, watched the sun disappear behind the towers. For the first time in years he felt uncertain, not about his empire, not about his wealth, but about a simple, unassuming girl who had dared to challenge him and, in doing so, had awakened something he thought was long dead: curiosity, wonder, and the faintest spark of longing. And so, as night fell over Eldoria, two lives moved inexorably toward each other. One shrouded in power and shadow, the other guided by courage and unseen strength. Their worlds were different, yet destiny had begun its work, weaving threads that neither could yet see, but would soon come to understand. The city slept, unaware that a storm of change was brewing, a storm that would test pride, power, and the heart itself. And at the heart of it, the arrogant billionaire and the fearless waitress stood on the edge of a story that would change them forever. The city of Eldoria never truly slept, even as the golden lights dimmed and shadows stretched across the marble streets. Whispers of the previous banquet still lingered. Tales of Ilara's courage had spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the city. People spoke in low voices about the waitress who had dared to humiliate Caius Veyron, the man no one ever challenged. Caius, however, did not enjoy the gossip. He stood in his penthouse looking out over the sprawling city. The night was quiet, yet his mind was anything but. He could not stop thinking about the girl with midnight hair and fearless eyes. Every detail of her movements, every word she had spoken, replayed in his mind. He had never been confronted like this before. Not by a rival, not by a friend, not even by someone who sought to betray him, but her words had pierced the armor he had built over the years. Her courage unsettled him, yet it also intrigued him, and for the first time in a long time he wanted to understand. The next morning, the city awoke to a clear sky. The streets were alive with merchants, couriers, and citizens beginning their day. Ilara, as usual, moved quietly through the crowded avenues, carrying trays of food and drink, delivering her small acts of service with care. Yet her mind was elsewhere. She could feel the weight of Caius's attention. She had seen the subtle ways he had watched her since the banquet, the way he seemed to notice everything about her without speaking, the way his presence lingered even when he was not near. It was unusual for someone like him to take notice of someone like her. And yet she could not deny a strange pull that tugged at her heart whenever she thought of him. She had lived her life carefully, avoiding the powerful and keeping her own secrets close. But now a question kept forming in her mind. Why did he watch her so closely? What did he want from her? By mid-afternoon, a letter arrived. The seal was unmistakable, Caius Veyron. Ilara paused before opening it, her heart beating faster than it had in weeks. With careful hands, she broke the wax and unfolded the parchment. The message was simple yet unsettling. Meet me at the old city gardens tonight. There are truths you do not yet understand. Come alone, Ilara frowned. She had no reason to trust him. He was dangerous in ways she could not fully understand, and yet the words carried a weight that felt almost urgent, almost necessary. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded to herself. She would go. As night fell, the city transformed. The bustling streets became quiet lanes lit by flickering lanterns. Ilara moved carefully, her senses alert. The old city gardens were hidden from most citizens, a place where fountains whispered and shadows played between ancient stone arches. It was here that Caius had asked her to come. She arrived to find him waiting. He stood by a marble fountain, water catching the moonlight and turning it silver. His suit was dark, perfectly fitted as always, but his posture was relaxed, unlike the commanding presence he carried in public. He looked at her, and for a moment neither spoke. "You came," he said finally, his voice softer than she expected. "I did," Ilara replied. She kept her distance, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "Why am I here?" Caius stepped closer, but not too close. "I need to explain," he said. "What happened at the banquet? It should not have happened the way it did. But more importantly, I need to understand you. Why you spoke to me. Why you dared to—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Challenge me in front of everyone." Ilara studied him. She could see a flicker of vulnerability behind his eyes, a shadow of something he had long hidden. "Because someone had to," she said. "Someone had to show that fear is not respect, and that pride can blind even the most powerful." Caius's gaze softened, but it did not lose its intensity. "Most people," he said quietly, "would never have said that. Most people would have bowed, stayed silent, or left. You chose a different path, and that unsettles me." Ilara's heart quickened. She did not fully understand why his words mattered to her, but they did. She had always known the world was full of power, and that power often crushed those who opposed it. Yet here was a man, powerful beyond measure, admitting that her words had affected him. "I do not seek to unsettle you," she said. "I only speak the truth. That is all." Caius nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she realized. "Truth, yes. That is dangerous in this city. People fear truth, especially when it threatens their illusions. And yet you wield it with courage. That is rare." A quiet moment passed between them. The sound of the fountain, the rustling leaves, and the distant city lights created a strange, almost magical atmosphere. Ilara realized she was not afraid, not of him, not of the city, not even of what might come next. Caius broke the silence. "There is something I must tell you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I am not like other men. There are burdens I carry, things you cannot see, and powers I cannot fully control. You may be the only one who can help me keep them in check." Ilara frowned. "Powers?" she asked. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I have a curse," he said softly. "It is not just a story or a rumor. It is real, and it has shaped everything I have become. I control many things in this city, but not this, not the darkness within me. And yet when I see you, I feel something I have not felt in years, hope." Ilara took a step back, startled. A curse? She had heard stories of magic, of hidden forces and ancient powers, but she had never imagined it could touch someone like him, the man whose very presence commanded fear and admiration. And yet she could see it in his eyes. There was truth in his words, and there was pain too, a deep, quiet pain that only someone brave enough could face. "I do not know if I can help you," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I am not powerful like you, and I do not belong in your world." Caius smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and something softer. "Perhaps not, but you belong somewhere, and that somewhere may be here with me, not as a servant, not as someone to obey, but as someone who can see what others cannot, someone who can remind me of the light when all else is dark." Ilara's breath caught. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, and the gentle tone of his voice left her momentarily speechless. She had never heard such words from a man like him, words that did not demand, threaten, or command, but invited. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. Then Caius spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are forces in this city, people who wish to see me fall, and you may be the only one who can help me face them. I cannot promise safety, but I can promise truth, and perhaps a chance at something greater than either of us has ever known." Alara considered his words. The world was full of danger, yes, and he was not a man to be taken lightly. But there was honesty in him, and there was a pull she could not resist, a sense that her own life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. "I will come," she said finally. "I will help you, but only if we are equals, only if we face the truth together." Caius nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Agreed," he said. "Together then." The night grew deeper, and the city of Eldoria stretched out beneath them, vast and shimmering. Two lives, once separate, now moved toward a shared path, one filled with power, danger, and secrets. And though neither fully understood what lay ahead, both could feel it. A story was beginning, one that would test courage, reveal hidden strength, and awaken something neither had expected, something like hope, trust, and perhaps even love. As they left the gardens, the moonlight casting long shadows, both felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. The city around them seemed quieter, as if it too waited to see what would unfold. Caius had been challenged, and in that challenge he had found more than he expected. Alara had stepped into a world far beyond her own, and yet she felt ready. For the first time in years, the billionaire and the waitress were no longer alone. And as the shadows of the city stretched before them, the seeds of change had been sown. The night ended with a promise. Silent yet powerful, they would face what came together, and nothing, no curse, no power, no fear could undo the bond forming between them. The nights in Eldoria had grown colder, and the city lights flickered against the dark sky like stars fallen to earth. Alara moved carefully through the narrow alleys, the letter from Caius burning lightly in her pocket. Tonight he had asked her to meet him again, not in the grand halls of power, not in the crowded streets, but in the abandoned observatory that overlooked the city. It was a place forgotten by most, where time itself seemed to slow, and shadows played in quiet corners. Caius waited at the top of the spiral staircase, his tall figure silhouetted against the pale moonlight that spilled through the broken windows. His suit, dark and sharp, reflected the soft silver glow, and his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, rested on her the moment she stepped inside. "You came," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of something unspoken. "I did," Alara replied, keeping a careful distance. "Why here? Why not somewhere safe?" Caius's lips curved in a faint, almost wistful smile. "Safe," he repeated softly, as if the word tasted strange to him. "There is no safe place in this city for truth. There are only corners where shadows are easier to ignore. But you seem to find them anyway." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear but from the strange energy that filled the room. The observatory was filled with dust and faded stars painted on the ceiling, remnants of a time when people had looked to the heavens for answers. Now it felt like a place where the past and the future met, where secrets lingered in the corners. "I do what I must," she said quietly, "and tonight I think you need to tell me what is happening. I do not understand the curse you mentioned, and yet—" Her voice faltered slightly. "I can feel it. Something is not right, Caius." Caius nodded and stepped closer, though he kept a careful distance, as if afraid that moving too near would break the fragile trust forming between them. "It is not just the curse," he said, his voice low. "It is the city, the people, and the choices I have made. I have power, yes, but power is a dangerous thing. And curses. Curses have a way of finding the cracks in your armor." He paused, and for a moment, he seemed smaller than she had ever imagined. Less the unyielding figure the city feared, and more a man weighed down by his own secrets. Alara's heart softened. She had never seen him like this, not fully human, yet not entirely untouchable. He was a man caught between shadows and light, and she could sense the struggle within him. "Then tell me," she said gently. "Tell me everything so I can help." Caius's eyes flickered with surprise, then something softer. Relief, perhaps. He moved to the window and gestured to the city below. "Look at it," he said. "All of it. The people, the buildings, the streets. They see me as powerful, untouchable. But they do not see the curse, the darkness I carry. It is in me, and it grows stronger when I give in to arrogance, to anger, to pride. And yet there is something about you. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. That calms it. That keeps it from consuming me. Ilara stepped closer, drawn by the intensity of his gaze. And what do you expect from me? She asked. To be your anchor? Your guide? No, he said firmly. I expect nothing. I only hope that you can stand beside me and not be afraid of what you might find. I cannot promise safety. Not from the curse, not from the city, not from myself. But I can promise honesty. And perhaps a chance to be something more than the sum of our fears. The words lingered between them, soft and heavy. Ilara realized that she was not afraid. Not of the curse, not of him, not even of the unknown. There was a strange pull, a connection she could not explain, as if their destinies were entwined in ways neither could see. They spent hours in the observatory that night. Caius showed her ancient texts, old scrolls with cryptic symbols and strange drawings. He explained the history of his curse, how it had been passed down in his family for generations and how it fed on unchecked ambition and fear. Ilara listened intently, asking questions, offering insights she had never shared with anyone. You have a gift, Caius said suddenly, his voice soft. You see what others cannot. You understand the threads of things, the hidden truths. That is why I need you. Ilara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had never considered her intuition or perception to be anything remarkable. Yet here was a man, feared by everyone in the city, telling her that it was her gift that might save him from himself. As the night deepened, they moved closer together, not in intimacy, but in understanding. They shared small stories, moments of their past that revealed not just who they were, but why they had become the people standing there now. Caius spoke of his childhood, the loneliness that had shaped his arrogance and the heavy burden of expectation that had followed him into every boardroom and banquet hall. Ilara spoke of her family, her struggles to survive, and the quiet strength that had carried her through years of uncertainty. For the first time, they saw each other fully, not the facades, not the power or fear, but the truth beneath. And in that truth, a spark ignited, small but undeniable. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to creep through the shattered windows. Ilara rose, brushing dust from her sleeves, her mind full of thoughts she could not easily explain. Caius stood beside her, silent, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You should go, he said finally. The city will awaken soon, and so must we both. But thank you for tonight, for seeing me as I am and not as everyone expects me to be. Ilara nodded. I will return, she said quietly. But only if you promise to be honest with me in all things. I promise, he said, his voice unwavering. As she left the observatory and descended into the streets, the city was waking. Lanterns flickered, merchants called out to customers, and the first rays of sunlight painted the marble buildings in gold. Ilara felt a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. She knew their journey had only just begun. The curse, the power, and the secrets of Caius's world were far from over, and yet she also knew that she had found a place where she could stand. Not behind fear, but beside someone who had long been untouchable. Caius watched her disappear into the city streets, the dawn reflecting off his dark eyes. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope he had almost forgotten. The curse still lingered, still whispered in the corners of his mind. But there was now a force that could challenge it, not with strength, but with courage and understanding. Days turned into nights and nights into weeks. Ilara continued her quiet life in the city, but now the world around her seemed more alive, more dangerous, and yet more beautiful. Every encounter with Caius brought new insights, new challenges, and new revelations about herself and the city she thought she knew. Caius, for his part, began to change. Not completely. He was still the feared man of Eldoria, commanding attention wherever he went. But a subtle warmth had entered his heart. He began to see people differently, to notice small acts of kindness and to question the arrogance that had once defined him. And all of it was because of her, the waitress who had dared to speak the truth, who had refused to bow and who now walked beside him, quietly and courageously, through a city of shadows and light. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, a new threat emerged. A rival in the city had begun to notice Caius's distraction, his momentary softness, and saw an opportunity to exploit it. Rumors of betrayal, Whispers of weakness and subtle moves in the political shadows began to circulate. Ilara, sensing the shift, felt a chill in her chest. This city, powerful and alive, had its own rules, and not everyone would accept the change that Caius was beginning to undergo. Caius stood beside her, watching the city lights flicker. "They do not understand," he said, his voice quiet. "They see my power, but they do not see the price I pay for it. And they will try to take it from me, even if it harms others." Ilara reached out, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "Then we face it together," she said. "Whatever comes, we do not stand alone." Caius's gaze softened, a rare smile touching his lips. "Together," he echoed. As night fell over Eldoria, the city seemed to hold its breath. Two lives once separate were now entwined. The curse, the danger, and the shadows of the city loomed ahead. But so did courage, understanding, and the slow, undeniable pull of something deeper, something like trust, and perhaps even the beginning of love. And in that quiet moment, as stars began to shimmer above, both knew that their story had only just begun, and that the dance of fire and ice between them would shape not just their hearts, but the fate of the city itself. The city of Eldoria was quieter than usual that evening. A pale mist hung over the marble streets, curling around lanterns and cloaking alleys in mystery. Though most citizens were unaware, a storm was brewing, not of weather but of secrets, power, and danger. The shadows of the city had begun to stir, and even the mighty Caius Veyron could feel their presence pressing against him like unseen hands. Ilara moved swiftly through the streets, her senses alert. She had learned to notice subtle changes, the slight pause of a passerby, the flicker of light where none should be, the way whispers seemed to travel faster at night. Ever since that first banquet, she had been drawn deeper into Caius's world, a world of hidden forces, ancient curses, and unspoken dangers. And now she could sense that something far greater was approaching. She arrived at the observatory, the place that had become their secret refuge, and found Caius waiting. He was leaning against the railing, his dark eyes scanning the city below. The pale mist gave him an ethereal appearance, as if he were not fully part of the world around him, yet not entirely separate from it either. "You felt it too?" she asked, her voice low. Caius nodded. "Yes," he said. "The shadows are moving faster now. The city is changing, and there are those who see my weakness as an opportunity." Ilara frowned. "What do you mean, who?" Caius's jaw tightened. "Rivals. People who have always waited for a moment like this. They believe I am distracted, that my focus is on something other than the throne of this city. And they are right." "I am distracted by you." Ilara's cheeks warmed. She had expected caution, anger, even arrogance, but not this raw honesty. She stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. He looked at her, a mixture of relief and admiration in his gaze. "Together," he echoed. The following days were tense. Rumors spread quickly through the city, whispers of rebellion and treachery. Caius continued his duties, commanding respect and attention, yet he could not ignore the subtle threats that now shadowed every move he made. And through it all, Ilara remained by his side, guiding him with her insight and intuition. She was learning the ways of the city, understanding its hidden paths, and reading the unspoken intentions of its inhabitants. One evening, Caius took her to a hidden chamber beneath his penthouse, a place few had ever seen. The walls were lined with old books and scrolls, relics of generations past. The room smelled faintly of ink and old stone, and a soft light illuminated the faded symbols etched into the walls. "This is where I study the curse," Caius explained, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet chamber. "Where I try to understand it, to control it. But it is stronger than I am, and it feeds on fear, pride, and doubt. If I am not careful, it can consume me completely." Ilara ran her fingers lightly over one of the old scrolls. "Then let me help," she said softly. "I do not have your power, but I have seen things others cannot. Perhaps together we can find a way." Caius studied her, his eyes searching hers. "I do not know if it can be done," he admitted. "But I do know that with you by my side I feel hope, something I have not felt in years." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They trained together, not in combat, but in understanding the nature of the curse, the city, and themselves. Caius taught her to read the signs, to recognize subtle shifts in the energy around them. Ilara taught him patience, the value of trust, and the quiet power of observing rather than commanding. Yet the threat outside their safe world continued to grow. One night, as they returned from a secret meeting in the city, a figure emerged from the mist. Cloaked in dark robes, their face hidden, the stranger moved with precision and purpose. Ilara's hand went instinctively to Caius's arm. "You've come too far," the stranger said, voice low and smooth. "And yet you still do not understand the danger that surrounds you. The curse is awakening. It will not wait." Caius stepped forward, his presence commanding even in the shadowy alley. "I understand more than you think," he said, "and I will not be intimidated." The stranger laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo in the mist. "We shall see," they said, before disappearing as suddenly as they had appeared. Ilara's heart raced. "Who was that?" she asked. Caius's jaw tightened. "Someone who wishes to see me fall. Someone who knows about the curse and wants to use it against me." The next days were filled with subtle attacks, plans disrupted, rumors spread, and attempts to undermine Caius's influence in the city. It became clear that the curse was not the only danger they faced. Their enemies were clever, patient, and relentless. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of orange and purple, Caius brought Ilara to the top of his tallest tower. The wind whipped around them, carrying the distant sounds of the city below. "Look at the city," he said, "all of it. Every street, every building. They depend on me, whether they realize it or not. And yet the curse and my enemies threaten everything I have built. That is why I need you." Ilara gazed out over the city, her mind racing. She understood the stakes now, not just for Caius, but for everyone in Eldoria. "Then we prepare," she said. "We face the curse together, and we face whatever comes from the shadows." Caius nodded. "Together," he repeated, a faint smile touching his lips. Days turned into nights, and the tension continued to build. They worked tirelessly, deciphering old texts, understanding the nature of the curse, and anticipating the moves of their enemies. In quiet moments, they would speak of their fears, their hopes, and their growing bond. The city was dangerous, yes, but within the walls of their shared efforts, they found a rare sense of safety, understanding, and even warmth. Yet the climax was approaching. One night, a sudden surge of the curse's energy swept through the city. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. Whispers filled the streets, and a cold wind seemed to move with intention. Caius felt it first, a pressure in his chest, a darkness pressing against him from the inside. "Ilara," he said urgently, taking her hand. "It is stronger now. The curse. It will not wait. We must face it tonight." Together they returned to the hidden chamber beneath his penthouse. The air was thick with power, the room vibrating with energy that neither fully understood. Caius began the rituals he had learned from the old scrolls, while Ilara assisted, reading signs, observing patterns, and guiding him with her intuition. The room shook with unseen force. Shadows twisted and moved as if alive, wrapping around them, testing their resolve. Caius gritted his teeth, fighting the darkness that threatened to consume him, while Ilara stood firm, her courage anchoring him, reminding him of light in the midst of shadow. Hours passed like minutes. Exhaustion pressed against them, but neither wavered. The bond between them, forged through courage, trust, and understanding, became their greatest strength. Together they began to push back the darkness, using knowledge, intuition, and sheer willpower to contain the curse. At last, the shadows receded, retreating into the corners of the city, leaving the chamber filled with silence. Caius collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily, his dark eyes reflecting both relief and awe. Ilara knelt beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." Caius looked at her, a rare softness in his expression. "No," he corrected. "You did it. I would have been lost without you." And yet, his gaze drifted to the city below, where lights twinkled like stars. "And yet this is only the beginning. The curse is stronger than I imagined, and there are still those who wish to see me fall. But now I know that I am not alone, and perhaps neither are you." Ilara smiled faintly, a mix of relief and determination in her eyes. "Then we continue," she said. "Together. Whatever comes, we face it together." As they left the chamber, the city seemed to hold its breath. Eldoria had witnessed many storms, many battles, many triumphs. But tonight, two lives had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than shadows, and stronger than curses. The crucible of darkness had tested them, and they had emerged not just surviving, but stronger. united, and ready for whatever lay ahead. And in the quiet of the night, as the first stars appeared above, both knew that their journey was far from over. The curse still lingered, their enemies still plotted, and the shadows still whispered, but they had each other. And in that truth, they found a power greater than fear, greater than darkness, and perhaps greater than even the city itself. The city of Eldoria seemed to hold its breath that night. The streets were empty, the marble buildings bathed in silver moonlight. A quiet mist rolled over the cobblestones, carrying with it the weight of unseen forces. Shadows stretched longer than usual, twisting in strange shapes. Every corner seemed alive, as if the city itself was waiting for something to happen. Elara moved with careful steps through the empty streets. Her heart raced not with fear but with anticipation. Tonight she and Caius would face the final test, the culmination of the curse, the threats from rivals, and the shadows that had haunted the city for so long. This was the moment that would decide not just their lives but the fate of Eldoria itself. She arrived at the tallest tower in the city, where Caius waited. He stood at the edge of the balcony, looking out over the glowing city below. His figure was tall and commanding, yet there was a tension in his shoulders she had never seen before. His dark eyes reflected both worry and determination, the weight of responsibility heavy upon him. "You came," he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Always," Elara replied. "We face this together." Caius nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Together," he echoed. The moment was shattered by a sudden surge of energy. The curse, dormant for days, awoke with a force that made the air thick and electric. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting like living things. Whispers filled the night, soft but insistent, pressing against their minds. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she did not step back. She tightened her grip on Caius's arm, drawing strength from their bond. "The curse is stronger than ever," Caius said, his voice low. "It senses fear, anger, and doubt. And right now, it senses everything we have faced." Elara nodded. "Then we give it nothing. We face it together as equals, not as master and servant, not as powerful and weak, but as two people standing side by side." Caius looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting awe. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly. "I would have been lost without you, and yet I see now that strength is not measured by power alone, but by courage, by trust, and by the willingness to face the unknown." The curse surged again, a wave of cold and shadow that pressed against their senses. The city seemed to shiver as if it were alive, responding to the dark energy. Stones rattled, the wind howled through the streets, and the air pulsed with an invisible force. Caius raised his hands, channeling the knowledge he had gained from the ancient texts, while Elara guided him with her insight, reading patterns and predicting movements of the darkness. For hours they battled the curse, not with swords or weapons, but with understanding, courage, and willpower. Shadows twisted and coiled around them, testing their focus, probing their fears, and whispering doubts. Caius felt the weight of the curse pressing against his chest, the darkness threatening to overwhelm him. But Elara's steady presence reminded him of what he had fought to protect, the bond they shared, the city they loved, and the truth they both sought. "You are stronger than you know," Elara said, her voice cutting through the whispers. "Focus on us. Focus on what we are fighting for, not what you fear." Caius drew a deep breath, letting her words guide him. Slowly, deliberately, they began to push back the darkness. The shadows resisted, but they could not withstand the unity and determination of two hearts standing as one. The cursed energy hissed and recoiled, shrinking in size and intensity with every step of their combined effort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shadows faltered. The city fell silent, the mist lifting, the air clearing of the heavy pressure that had pressed down for days. The curse had not been destroyed, for some forces cannot be undone entirely, but it had been contained. It would no longer threaten the city in the immediate future, and it could be managed with caution, patience, and continued vigilance. Caius collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily, the weight of the effort leaving him momentarily drained. Elara knelt beside him, her hand resting on his arm, grounding him. "We did it," she said softly. "No," Caius corrected, his voice filled with quiet awe. "You did it. I only guided the effort. Your insight, your courage, it carried us. Without you, I would have fallen, and the city with me." Elara shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "We faced it together. That is what matters, and now the city can begin to heal just as we can. For a long moment, they simply sat together, watching the first light of dawn touch the city. The streets began to glow with gold and silver, the people stirring, unaware of the battle that had raged in the shadows. Caius finally rose to his feet, extending a hand to Elara. She took it without hesitation, and together they stepped onto the balcony, looking out over the city that had been both their challenge and their test. "You have changed me," Caius said quietly, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "I was once a man ruled by fear, by pride, by power alone. But you have shown me another way. Courage, trust, hope. I see now that there is more to life than control and fear. There is connection, understanding, and—" He paused, searching for words. Love, perhaps. Elara felt her heart stir at his words. She had not expected such honesty, such vulnerability. Yet in this quiet moment under the early light of morning, she realized that she had felt something like this too, something deeper than curiosity, deeper than trust. Something that had grown quietly, patiently over weeks of shared struggle and understanding. She began, unsure how to express the depth of her feelings. "I think I feel the same. But not just for the power you wield, for who you are, the real you, behind the armor and the curse." Caius reached out, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to it. "Then we face the world together," he said. "Not as master and servant, not as feared and cautious, but as equals, as partners. Whatever comes next, we do not face it alone." Elara nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. The dangers of the city, the curse, and the shadows had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, united, and wiser. And for the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a waitress, not as someone small in a vast city, but as a person of strength, courage, and value. The days that followed were filled with change. Caius began to govern the city with a new perspective, balancing strength with empathy, power with understanding. The people noticed the shift, sensing the difference in his approach. And Elara, once hidden in the background, became a trusted advisor, confidant, and equal partner. Yet their bond was more than duty. It was the quiet, steady presence they provided each other in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. Every challenge they faced, every decision they made, was strengthened by the trust and courage they had built together. One evening, as the sun set and painted the city in gold and rose hues, Caius and Elara stood atop the tallest tower, overlooking Eldoria. The wind played with their hair, the city lights glittered below, and a sense of calm settled over them. "You have given me more than you know," Caius said softly, taking her hand. "Not just in facing the curse or the city or the shadows, but in showing me that there is more to life than power alone. You have changed me," Elara smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "And you have shown me courage, hope, and the strength to face what I once feared. We have both changed, together." The sky darkened slightly as stars began to appear, one by one shining like distant diamonds. The city stretched below them, quiet and beautiful, a place they had fought to protect and would continue to nurture. Caius drew Elara closer, and together they stood in silence, feeling the weight of the journey they had shared, and the promise of the future that awaited them. There were still challenges ahead. Shadows lingered, mysteries remained, and the curse would never fully disappear. But they faced the world together as equals, as partners, and as something stronger than either could have been alone. The first light of dawn broke over Eldoria, spilling gold across the marble streets and towers. In that light, two figures stood together, strong, unafraid, and united. The arrogant billionaire and the courageous waitress had both been tested. Both had fallen and risen, and both had discovered a truth more powerful than fear, more enduring than shadow, and more precious than gold: the strength of connection, the courage to face the unknown, and the quiet, transformative power of love. And as the city awoke to a new day, the story of Caius and Elara shone like a beacon, proof that even in the darkest shadows, hope, courage, and love could prevail. The curse had tested them, the shadows had challenged them, and the world had demanded their strength. But together they had emerged victorious, not just in power, but in heart. The dawn was their promise, and the city, their witness.